What is up, everyone? We got another week of UFC fights to break down from a Draftkings DFS perspective. And this week we got the headliner of Hermansson versus Pyfer, which should be a good fight. I'm really high on Pyfer and his future in the sport. I think that he's a really good prospect, and there's no better contender to test him against. Well, I don't want to say that, but Hermansson's a good contender to test his skill set a bit. And if he can get past this, I think you put him in there with a top 10 guy, and then this division gets even more interesting. But anyways, let's get right into it. I'm going to break down, each fighter, their price, how their metrics and their ways to score rank up against their price. Talk about their upside. Talk about a little bit of ownership, at least my guess on ownership. But this is mostly just going to be focused on identifying upside and identifying good plays. There's not going to be much talk of um, lineup construction and ownership fading and all of that stuff. So first up, we got Oki, and his new opponent is let's see here. Why can't I find it? Oh, here we go. Timothy Kiwamba, I think is how you say it. And so you got Oki. He used to be like a minus 300 favorite, and now he's only minus 235. Um, the fight rates to finish in about 10 minutes on a median projection. And at 9,500, even though we don't have the exact ITD lines yet, I'm going to go ahead and say that Oki's going to be hard to get to at this high of a price with his new opponent. 9.5K is just, you need a lot at that price, and I don't know if he's going to have enough. I would say he needs to have an ITD line of at least minus 110 to even consider paying up for him anywhere near a high priority. So he's probably going to be fringy, if not a fade, based on my guess of the metrics that I see right now. And then Timothy Kiwamba, he most likely will be priced around 6.7K, 6.8K. And I mean, if he is, for example, plus 200 to win and like plus 300 ITD, then he's probably going to be somewhat of a good play. But he has a lot working against him. He's coming in on 4 days' notice. He just had a fight last week, and he's moving up a weight class. There's a lot of stuff going against him, but the line is what it is. And if his ITD line is nearly the same as his win odds, then you probably have to take a shot on him. But I think overall this fight is probably pretty fringy, if not a pass on both sides, pending the exact metrics that we see later in the week. Then we got Loma versus Bruno Brazil. And this is a fight where I've heard that mostly that Loma is the better fighter pretty much everywhere, but Bruno's a bit bigger and stronger than her, and Loma's a bit undersized for this division. And Loma, she's mostly a striker, but she can get takedowns. She's pretty well rounded, and her ITD line at plus 250 or so is just, that's really not good for this price. And then Bruna Brazil at plus 600 is not good for her price either. So what I would say about this fight is, if you believe in the inherent variance that comes with women's MMA, then you probably just take Bruna Brazil at 6.8K and call it a day. But for me, this fight, I'm still not sure what I want to do with it, but I'm leaning towards just playing a little bit of Loma because I do think she wins this fight, and she might have a little bit of grappling upside. Again, I think in a decision win, she'll probably score around 90, 95 points, which is not going to be good enough for her price, but I might get to her just a tiny bit. And I guess the quote unquote sharp play would probably be Brazil just because of how low she's priced. And, like I said, the inherent variance that comes with women's MMA. So I think this fight's a fade overall, but for me, it's going to be Loma or pass. Then we got Daniel Marcos versus Richie Lane. And this is another fight that just kind of looks like a fade on paper. You again have uh, relatively efficient money lines, and Daniel Marcos plus 250. He's also a pure striker. He's also relatively low volume. That's just not a recipe for success when you're looking for ceilings in MMA. And then you got Richie Lane at plus 400 ITD. That's actually not bad for his price. He's 6.9K. That's actually not bad, to be honest with you. Um, and if you also have an opinion that this line's a bit wide and you think that Richie Lane has, a better chance to win than these odds suggest, then he's an even stronger play. So I think this fight on paper is a pass, but Richie Lane seems like the more appealing side, if anything. It's because his ITD line is not bad, and I do think this line may be a bit wide, even though I know it's hard to say that because if it's wide, then why am I not putting money on Richie Lane? I know. But I think for DFS, it's Richie Lane or pass for me. And then we got Carlos Prates versus Trevin Giles. And this is a fight I think that Prates should more than definitely be the side. So yeah, has a really strong ITD line. Pretty decent round one odds as well. You get a round one finish and a knockdown at 9.2K. That should be good enough. And Trevin Giles on the other side, everyone that I've watched says that he can't win unless he wrestles, and he's not known for putting on the wrestling shoes and grinding out a fight that way. Usually he'll get one, maybe two takedowns in a fight. So this fight just doesn't look good for Trevin Giles, honestly, and his ITD line plus 450 is just not that good. So I think this one's a Prates or pass in DFS. And Prates is the first play that we've seen that I think is a really strong play, both on paper and in my opinion. Then we got Gregory Rodriguez versus Brad Tavares. And take a look here. Once again, a pretty efficiently priced line. Brad Tavares plus 410-ish inside the distance. Gregory Rodriguez about plus 170. This is interesting because when I first saw this fight, I thought, okay, I think Rodriguez by finish is probably going to be what happens. But then I saw the line and the 2.5 line with even juice and Gregory Rodriguez plus 150. That was, a lot higher than I expected. And you got Brad Tavares, and both of these guys are pretty fragile, and both of these guys are, can be hurt from what I've heard and, what I've watched. But I just don't think Brad Tavares is going to be the guy that does knock out Rodriguez, even with his chin concerns. So I think Tavares is a fade, and he's kind of where fantasy points. I love this saying. Eric Haber always says this, like where fantasy points go to die. That's kind of what I think of Brad Tavares. He is that fighter. And Rodriguez, he might have a little bit of takedown upside, although Tavares has really good takedown defense historically. Rodriguez should have the power advantage, and I think this is a Rodriguez or pass spot, but both sides don't really look too amazing. But for me, I'm going to go with Rodriguez to get the win, and I will have some interest in him in DraftKings. Then we got Joe Pyfer, Jack Hermansson, the main event. And I'll tell you what, I have a really strong opinion on this fight. I think that Joe Pyfer is good. Obviously, we haven't seen him tested that much. There's cardio questions. We haven't seen him, get out of the third. We haven't seen him go into a fourth or fifth round, which is why I see a lot of the sharp community, especially earlier in the week, they were piling on this Hermansson 3, 4, and 5 narrative as a system play is what people call it. Similar to Neil Magny a couple weeks ago. Remember when Malott gassed out and Magny won in round 3? A lot of the sharp people had Magny round 3 because that's just kind of the system play. If a new prospect it gets cardio fraud checked, Magny's going to be there to put him away in round 3. And anyway, that's for like a betting discussion. And I do think it's smart, honestly. If Hermanson is going to win, I do think it's smart to maybe target one of these round 4 or round 5 props at these huge odds. But I just don't think he wins. I think that Pyfer is a really good prospect. I think that he's going to come in here and get Hermanson out of here in the first 2 rounds. I think he has he can stuff all the takedowns Hermansson has to offer. I think Pyfer can get his own takedowns if he wants, because Hermansson is a dangerous grappler when he's in control. He's not dangerous when he's the one on bottom. So I think Pyfer can get in here. He has takedown upside. I think he has knockout upside. He has early finishing upside. And if it goes 5 rounds, I still think he'll score well. Um, Obviously, I think the narrative is that if it goes 5 rounds, Hermansson's going to be a lot more live. But I just think Pyfer wins this fight any way he wants. So give me Pyfer a pass. And that's about it. I just have a really strong opinion on that fight that Pyfer gets it done. So I think he's also the second strong. I think Prates and Pyfer are the two plays in the 9K range that rate to be way better than the rest on paper. Then we got Devin Clark versus Marcin Prachnio. And Prachnio is kind of they're light heavyweights, but Prachnio is kind of known as like a point striker, which is kind of odd at that weight class. And Devin Clark is kind of known as a grinder. He has, maybe some knockout power, but he mainly goes to his wrestling as a big, strong guy with decent wrestling for this division. And his ITD line is not amazing, but I think with the wrestling upside, it's okay. And Prachnio just not a good ITD line, and like we said, he's kind of a low volume striker, so he's not going to really score well in his wins. So give me Clark or pass, but both sides of this fight do look pretty mediocre. Then we got Dan Ige versus Andre Philly. And this is a fight. I'll tell you what, this week I decided to just look at this card and kind of make my opinions before I saw any of the odds or the lines. And when I saw this fight, I thought, number one, absolute fireworks. I think this fight is going to be really fun to watch. And number two, I thought it would be one of these fights with like a 2.5 round line with the under at like minus 160 or so. So I was actually surprised to see that it was expected to go the distance. And looking into it further, I get it, but I just think that this is going to be a good fight, a high paced fight, possibly, and I think someone could get put away. That was like my gut reaction when I saw this matchup. Now on the metrics, you got both of these guys, especially Feely, just not rating to finish that well. So from a pure metric standpoint, I think you could honestly make the case to fade it, or you can make it an Ige or pass. But I just have I think it's a good fight environment, just period. And I think that I'm gonna get to both sides of this and just hope that there's a car crash and there's a really high pace and one of these guys gets put away. So that's kind of my hot take. I know that that Ige especially is known to be really durable, but this just seems like a really good environment for fantasy points to occur. So I'm going to take a shot on both sides, and that's that. Jeremiah Wells versus Where's Max Griffin? So Wells is kind of like he's a DFS gold mine per se. He throws with knockout power. He has a great ground game and submission game, and he's going to fight at a relatively high pace. So he's pretty much just a good play, I think, no matter which way you look at it from the metrics, from my opinion, everything. I think Wells is just a good play. And then Max Griffin, he's about plus 260. And yeah, that's fine for this price. I don't really have an opinion on this fight, to be honest with you. I don't have like a really strong opinion on either side. So I think both sides of this fight are good in DFS. I think one of these guys could get put away. And if it is a decision, I do think that Wells can still score well. We've seen him put up, 105 in a decision win. So yeah, give me both sides of this fight, but I think the better side from a pure upside and metric standpoint is the Jeremiah Wells. Then we got Zach Pauga versus Guskov, and this is another thing I think is funny about the MMA community is there's always a hipster underdog play of the week. It's like the underdog favorite. So Zach Pauga is currently favored, right? But if you watch content, if you look at Tapology, you look at all of these things, almost everyone is picking Guskov to win this fight. Um, so I always find that funny when there's just like the underdog that everyone is on, and it's always an underdog that's like plus 110 to like plus 160. Somewhere it's every week there's someone like this that is in that range, and just everyone is picking to win. And that guy is Guskov this week. Now, in betting, like I don't really have an opinion, to be honest with you. But in DFS, it's no secret that Guskov, most of his wins are coming in round one. He has that finishing ability, especially early, and you just got to play him in DFS. Now, do I think he'll be popular because of number one his metrics, and number two just the overall public sentiment on him? Yeah, I do think he'll be popular, but you still got to play him. I mean, he still has that 110 in his range of outcomes with the first round finish. So yeah, he's a good play. And then Zach Pauga, I think that he's like everyone who's saying that Zach Pauga will win, which is very few people, are saying that he's going to win a boring decision, which is what he did last time uh, against who did he fight? Jordan Wright. And even his last fight, yeah, both his last two fights just looked really boring, and he did not score well in either one. So if you're going off of the narrative, it's a Guskov or pass. But the metrics are what they are, okay? And Pauga is just as good as a play. And considering that Guskov will probably be really high owned, which obviously check on that when Friday comes around and ownership projections are out. But if that's the case, I think both sides of this fight are really strong, and I think the Pauga side will get very overlooked. Almost to the end here. So we got Michael Johnson, Darius Flowers. Just a weird fight. I've seen people so split on this. Like Michael Johnson is the way better fighter, but you just can't trust him. He's so inconsistent. He might have chin issues after his last knockout loss. All this stuff. At the end of the day, you have a line that's pretty efficient for DraftKings pricing, and you have two fighters who have really good ITD lines. So play both sides. I don't, especially because of everyone's so unsure on this fight. I just think one of these guys is going to get there, and I think you should play both sides of this. It's 1.5 round line, pretty 55-45 type of fight. Just get to both sides. I wouldn't overthink it. Lastly, we got Rodolfo Vieira versus Armin Petrosian. This is like the perfect style clash for MMA. Where is it? So it's about pick'em, which is about what you expect for this pricing. And you got Vieira with all the takedown upside and with allegedly all of the round one upside. So regardless if you and it's an even line, okay? At the end of the day, I think it's a hard fight to predict. I think if you're confident on either side, you're kind of out of your mind. But I do think whoever wins this fight is going to look like a huge favorite because like whoever's style prevails is going to look amazing. But it's just hard to gauge whose style is going to prevail. So once again, I think both sides of this are really good. I think if Vieira wins, you could have, the takedowns, you could have the control time, you could have the finishing upside, and then if Petrosian wins, I think he could land a lot of volume late, and if he gets a round two, round three finish with a knockdown and a lot of volume, that'll score well too. His ITD line is fine for his price as well. Not to mention if Vieira is going to be popular, I just think both sides of this fight are good, and it's a pretty good environment for DFS because I do think whoever wins will look good doing it. So, oh wait, there's one more fight. It's not priced yet, but I'm going to tell you, unless the pricing is somehow messed up horribly, that you're going to want both sides of this Robert Brishek fight and Ihor Pateria. Uh, Brishek minus 195 to win, and minus 185 to win by finish. So you're going to need him. And Pateria, kind of the same thing. He's like plus 250 to win, and he's like plus 200, plus 250 to win by finish, plus 200 to win the fight. So whatever he's priced at he'll have good metrics for that. And I think this fight rates to be a car crash that finishes in round one, and it's like a 60-40 type of fight. So get both sides of this. I mean, if you want to insert your own opinion, sure, but I would just get both sides of it and call it a day. So that's going to be it. Let's go through it one more time. We got Oki, kind of a fringy play. I don't think he'll be that good once we see his metrics. Loma, kind of a fade on paper. Marcos, a fade. Prates, good play. Rodriguez, fine play. Pyfer, good play. Clark is fine. Ige is kind of fringy, but I do like this fight environment, so I'm going to be targeting both sides. Wells is a good play. Pauga, I think, in DFS can be a really strong play. Both sides of the Flowers and Johnson fight are good. Both sides of the Vieira fight, although on paper, Vieira is probably the better DraftKings play. Guskov, underdog of the week, according to the community, and he's a good DFS play. Griffin, I think, is a good play. Feely, once again, I'm getting both sides of that fight. Prachnow's probably a fade. Hermansson's a fade for me. Tavares is a fade for me. Giles is a fade for me. Arichi Lane is fine. Burner Brazil is probably a fade unless you just really believe in the variance in women's MMA and think that Brazil can win. And a win at this low of a price could be good enough. So that's it for the breakdown. If you have any questions, please leave a comment. If anything changes, any fights fall through, and I'll look at ownership on Friday, and I'll try to make an updated community post on my player pool and my targets for the slate and all that. But yeah, I hope this helps. Best of luck this weekend, and I'll see you guys in the next one.